This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland front of the lane, lob to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including Bally Sports Ohio, without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. It is September. That means at the end of the month, we have NBA training camps opening up, which means we are closer to preseason, which means we are closer to Cavs basketball. I could not be more excited. I have officially got all of the rest that I need for an offseason. You know, it's a funny thing to say before I, put some stress on Carter by going on vacation at the end of the month, but I am rested, I'm recovered, and I'm very, very excited for this NBA season. I'm very excited to be talking to my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Joke's on you. I forgot you were going on vacation.
I believe you'll only need to cover for 2 podcasts while I'm gone, but at the same time, that is going to be the entirety of preseason. So enjoy that, buddy. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Can't wait, buddy. I am officially, like, all the distractions are out of the way. All my work trips are out of the way. And it's just like, all right, I've waited long enough.
I have too.
Give me what I want.
Exactly. And we're going to give the people what they want today. I've been enjoying doing these previews. We're not quite finished. We will still do a Sixers preview, but with it being September, I was like, you know what? I haven't got my Cavs fix. I haven't gone real nitty gritty when it comes to Cleveland Cavaliers basketball. And we need to do that again. I know sometimes those preview podcasts can be a little divisive in the YouTube comments, where some people really love them as a way to, kind of get a better feel for other teams around the Cavs. And some people just want to hear Cavs when they're listening to Cavs podcasts. So we're catering to those that want some Cleveland Cavaliers basketball today. With
some call them haters.
Honestly, like we get people that really, really love those, and the people that don't, skip those ones. That's perfectly fine. But we're going to kick things off with friend of the podcast, Evan Damrell, who asks, what are your hopes for how deep Kenny Atkinson will go into his bench and rotations? Will it be enough to get Tyson regular minutes, or will the guys returning from last season make it harder to find minutes for someone like Jaylon Tyson?
Oh man, I was just about to stifle a sneeze. It is interesting to kind of look at that rotation. I know Kenny ran a deeper one last time he was a head coach in Brooklyn. He played 10 guys pretty frequently, and I think, rightfully so, some Cavs fans who prefer longer rotations were like, "Oh man, what a great change!" Because JB, even when he was running 10, it was like a man wearing a suit that didn't quite fit him, Like he never looked like a guy who was thrilled to be managing a 10-man rotation. So I think a lot of people immediately went to like, oh great, we're going to get these long rotations. But something I'll continue to note is that because the Cavs top end talent has a ton of depth, because they have 4 all-star caliber players, you are always going to be up against a bit of a math problem when you're building a rotation. Because if Evan, Darius, Donovan, and Jarrett are all playing between 32 and 38 minutes, with the ability to scale that up in a close game up to the low 40s, if you're really tight down the stretch, like all of a sudden you just don't have that many minutes to go around, and then you end up playing certain guys like 6 or 7 minutes. And we saw that happen to Sam a couple times, and it was always like, he didn't do well in those minutes, and I wasn't surprised, because it was like, it's really hard to find your rhythm in 2-3 minute stints, once in the second quarter and once in the start of the fourth. So like, I think there is a bit of a math problem here that, Kenny will have to really manage those top 4's minutes, and frankly, Max Strus's, who's been a plus minus god last year for us, if we want to go that deep. So that I think we should answer that question before we even talk about Jaylon Tyson.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think when people discuss, wanting to see a deeper rotation, usually there's some like cause and effect implied where, we're playing our starters so many minutes. And as a result of that, that's why we're dealing with the injuries that we're dealing with. When in reality, I want to, I think your point is correct about when you have 4 top guys that are playing, serious minutes, you're going to be in a little bit of a numbers crunch and you run into that math problem. But I do think it's interesting to point out when you're looking at minutes per game, Donovan was 19th, Darius was 51st, Max was 74th, Mobley was 89th, and Jared Allen was 77th when it comes to minutes per game. The Cavs were not, the Tom Thibodeau Knicks where you see basically the starting lineup in the top 15 of minutes per game. These guys are not playing a lot of minutes relative to other starters in the NBA. I think when you look at minute load and some of the injuries and stuff, there's other factors that go into it beyond just the 34 minutes we see, right? Like these guys are practicing all the time. How many of those minutes are consecutive? Whereas if you're playing 34 minutes and you're playing 2 17-minute shifts, you might have more fatigue and wear and tear on your body than if it's a more balanced rotation where guys are going in and out. So I wouldn't even be surprised if the minute load for some of the starters increase, because that's more in line with what other coaches do. But I will say this, the biggest thing that makes it tougher for the Cavs to go deep is not the minute load of their starters, it's their 6th and 7th men. Karis LeVert averaged 29 minutes per game, Isaac Okoro averaged 27. You look at like George Niang and Dean Wade, both of those guys were at 22. And some of that is going to be inflated because of the time that guys miss time with injuries, obviously. But let's put that disclaimer there. But we have consistently seen that the Cavs' 6th and 7th man in particular are always playing near starter minutes, and you're not going to be able to go deeper in a rotation if you're doing that.
Yeah, everyone on the bench has got to be around 20, pretty much.
Right. I think we're not going to see a dramatic difference in the starters, but I think he's going to go deeper in the rotation, and I think that's going to come at the expense of someone like Karis LeVert. I think that's going to come at the expense of Isaac Okoro. I think you might have a situation where everybody's kind of guaranteed like 15 minutes per game, and then based on how they're performing, based on matchups, based on the flow of the game, you might get more, right? Like you might get up, that might be your 25-minute per game night, and it evens out to be 20. But I expect a 9-man rotation in all likelihood, 9 or 10. That's about where I'm comfortable. I personally prefer 9, where at least those 4 guys know how many minutes they're getting in the games they're playing. But I do expect a deeper rotation. But when it comes to, someone like Jaylon Tyson, I don't expect him to be in that opening night rotation unless there's a trade between now and then.
I think that's fair. And I think it's more interesting to ask, where would those minutes come from if he were to butt his way in? And, if you take the starting 5, you take Okoro, you take Karis, and you take Niang. So there's your 8 right there that I would expect to be kind of no doubters, though I do want to have a Niang Wade conversation at some point this summer.
Okay.
But we weren't asked about that right now. So I'm going to assume it's those 8. And then for 9 and 10, you have Sam Merrill, Ty Jerome, Dean Wade, Jaylon Tyson, kind of all competing for that, the 9th and 10th spot. If Dean's healthy, I think he's going to be the 9th guy. And so really, I think it's one spot for those 3 guys, Ty, Jaylon, Sam. Mm-hmm. And that's just my read right now. And no, I don't think he'll win that job. However, I do think there is a very good chance for him, depending on kind of how the season breaks, for him to end up. I think he could get up to that 9 spot if things go well enough for him. I think it's just going to be a matter of taking advantage of his opportunities when he gets them.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Jaylon Tyson, the path to him getting minutes, obviously, if Karis LeVert is still on this team, that's probably his primary competition. So it could be performance-based. If Karis is in a bit of a funk or if there's a knee issue, maybe he steps into. And, this is us applying the logic of what we've seen from rotations and substitutions in the past, where sometimes a guy would go from not playing to playing a pretty significant role and filling in that gap for the guy that they're replacing. I don't know if it would go all that way if, Karis missed some time and all of a sudden Tyson's playing that type of minute load, especially with someone like Ty Jerome, who we haven't even talked about. That, I think he's going to be in competition for some of those shooting guard and ball handling duties as well. So I think it would need to be a combination of maybe some injuries or, guys being in a funk and trying to get a different look. But the other factor that could play into his favor as well is, at least when you look at the roster currently, there's not a ton of depth behind Mobley. Like, there is Wade, there is Niang. I think both of those guys are going to feature prominently within the rotation. But if there's some injuries or if there's some inconsistency there, I wouldn't be surprised to see Jaylon Tyson play some small ball floor and opportunities open up for him at that position.
Yeah, I just think he's in a really good spot to glom onto minutes. You mentioned the chunk of minutes, even if you're not like a top 9 guy in the rotation. You think of CPJ last year, where when the rotation was injured in a specific way in which they really needed Craig, he could play 25 minutes. And then even if, one guy above him was hurt, he still might not get to play because they had Darius and Donovan there. And, he just wasn't needed as much. So I think that is a pretty reasonable outcome for Jaylon, though. Again, I would really love to see him challenge every single one of those guys that I listed in front of him for every scrap minute that he can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And in a roundabout way, we answered our buddy Toby's question from the Discord about the projected role for Tyson to start the season. I just don't think he's going to feature prominently within the rotation to start the year. But we could get to his next question, which is, who among the 3 two-way guys has the better pathway to get promoted this season? I'll start this one off just noting that at this time, even though there is reporting that JT Thor is signed with the Cavs, still not an official transaction yet. So we don't know for sure that he's on the team. So out of the 2 guys that we know for sure, Luke Travers and Amani Bates, I think there's more of a path for Luke Travers. But if JT Thor were to sign, either a two-way or a regular contract with the Cavs, I'd give him the edge just because he's someone
especially if he signs a regular contract.
Yes, especially if he signs a
that
regular
would really
contract.
give him the edge to get a roster spot.
Well, here's the reason why it says, yeah, okay, that's a good point, because the question was about being promoted. I will say this. He would have been someone that I'd be fine with signing for the minimum, because he is someone that is the same age as Jaylon Tyson. He's someone that is a very good athlete. He's someone that, showed promise shooting the 3-pointer. I think he's an NBA caliber player already. So I would give him the nod over anyone else theoretically. So if I'm okay with him as, the 15th man on the roster, I would most certainly be okay with him as a two-way spot.
Yeah, I think it's the no doubter if he ends up signing on a two-way. Teasing you about a verbal flub aside, because again, he's played. If you're signing, if you're converting a two-way at the end of the season, it's probably to be a break glass in case of emergency playoff player. And I certainly would. Maybe by mid-year I'll change my mind, but for now it'll definitely be Thor that I would pick.
Yeah, I totally agree. And well, because we shortchanged Toby just a little bit here, we'll go with another question from him. Injuries aside, who will have more impact this season, Sam or Ty?
I'm going to let you go first because I think I know your answer, but I want to hear it first.
I think I'm going to go with Ty Jerome. I think it is going to be fairly close. I really enjoyed the interview with Sam Merrill on Locked On Cast today with Danny Cunningham.
Danny, good get.
Yeah, really good get, really good interview. I thought it was interesting that Sam was kind of highlighting some of, adding to his game after being run off the 3-point line, just not feeling comfortable or like he had worked on that in-between game, the floaters, the decision-making in those spots. I think that would be really helpful. But I think when I look historically at Kenny Atkinson offenses, they have a lot of guys that can create. There's a lot of playmaking juice within those lineups, and they attack you in a variety of ways. And I think when it comes to Ty Jerome, assuming that he's healthy, you're talking about someone that has better size than Sam Merrill at 6'5", someone that has a reputation of being a solid defensive player, that doesn't turn the ball over, that is a very good shooter from outside. I just think he helps make a lot of lineups make sense, especially when you're talking about those kind of staggered minutes when the starters are split up. I think he's someone that fits really well with both of the guards and can make life easier for just about everybody. Sam can obviously do that as well with the shooting, but I'm going to give the nod to Ty.
Yeah, I'm not surprised you picked Ty, and I think, especially given kind of the way you lean near the end of the year, just kind of evaluating those on-off numbers, that and this is a Ty Jerome fan podcast. Both of us really like him, and my instinct was to pick him. However, I did think, and these aren't the same types of players, but I did think about the fact that when you're a coach installing a new offensive system, as Kenny Atkinson is, it's nice to have a couple comfort things that you can kind of install right away and know you can count on. And I think about the way that he used Joe Harris in Brooklyn as his like designated shooter. And obviously Joe Harris is bigger than Sam, was a more capable defender, a little bit better as a playmaker. But I just wonder if like having that designated capital S shooter role is something that Kenny's going to want. Ty is a good shooter, but he's not like a movement shooter like Sam. I mean, I think Sam is a 98th percentile type of three-point shooter. And I just wonder if when the chips are down or, he's doing a lot of teaching, having a guy who can just like, hey, run my set exactly as I have it on paper, and like knowing that Sam can do the same kind of things that Joe Harris was doing for them. Just a thought. But I do think it's kind of a toss-up. But if I had to pick, I would pick Sam.
Yeah, I think your logic is very sound there. The thing that just comes to mind for me when I'm thinking about those staggered lineups where, you're going one guard and one big, at least one guard in terms of Donovan or Darius, you can kind of get those guys some easy catch and shoot opportunities if you have someone like Ty Jerome running the point. And Ty also has familiarity with Kenny, right? Like they were together in Golden State. I think, that going back to your familiarity point, having a point guard that you've worked with can go a long way. And I think when you talk about off-ball shooting, Darius and Donovan can absolutely kind of fill that role while giving you more, obviously, right? Like their ability to impact the game is a little more multifaceted than Sam. So I just think you're correct. I could see it going that way. I agree that Sam Merrill can bring all of that. I just think he's more likely to be the spark plug that will have an impact at times where Ty is the more consistent presence within the rotation.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely fair. I do think it's a toss-up.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because, they really do have a lot of depth. We talked about this recently, but going from bottom of the league to 15th in the league in terms of bench production in a year where your starters were missing so much, like that goes to show that, there was an improvement there. There was some depth there. And if Ty Jerome can get healthy and Jaylon Tyson can, come in and make an impact as a rookie, and Sam's already kind of established himself, I think those three guys can bring a lot of options and decisions for Kenny and the coaching staff to make that, weren't necessarily there all of last year, right? Like it almost feels like we're back to a luxury standpoint. I'm going to knock on wood right now because we said that about the point guard rotation last year and we saw how quickly that can change. Our buddy Reese asks, which role guy who had years ranging from fine to tough, Okoro, Karras, and Yang, do you think comes into this season with a little more juice?
I mean, I think the easy answer is George, who will get graded on a curve that I think is actually positive for him because his playoffs were so rough that, I think it's sort of obfuscated that he was pretty good the last couple months of the season.
He really was.
And the other thing that obfuscated that was the fact that the Cavs weren't very good when George was playing his best ball, just like they happened to be going through a wane period while he waxed. So it was like, I think
everyone was just grumpy at all times while he was doing good things.
Yeah, so I feel like he is kind of best suited. He also has a year of familiarity. He's had an off season of prep, knowing what he kind of needs to do to succeed within this roster construct. I also expect the offense to be healthier under Kenny Atkinson, which only benefits a guy like George, who I thought, just eye test took more difficult movement threes than he had to take in years past. I've said a lot about how playing with Embiid is really valuable for a guy like George because he draws a double team before you do anything, before he makes his move. So you just get a lot of wide open set jumpers in an offense like that, where I think the Cavs had to work to move him a little bit more last year. So I think with all those reasons, I think he will probably have the best perception from year to year of the three.
Yeah, and obviously, it's tricky just because Isaac isn't necessarily assigned. I do think that if the offense looks the way I expect it to look, with more people initiating, more movement, more tempo, and more structure, that's someone that's a type of system that would benefit someone like Okoro, who does get out in transition, who finishes really well in transition and at the rim, that has good instincts as a cutter and makes good reads in those situations, and who at times, and particularly in the playoffs, floated and didn't really seem to know what he needed to do, and was having issues asserting himself. That's something that can be mitigated sometimes with structure. So I do think, assuming that Isaac is back, I think that he could really benefit, but I think George is the easy answer there. Gotta say, looking good in the workout videos. We talk about Mobley looking good in the workouts. George looks really good as well. Friend of the podcast. So hopefully he can have an impactful season, because, that stretch four is something that we still really need. When you talk about maximizing those minutes when the core four and the starting five isn't out there, having someone that can perform that role really, really is a benefit.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to see how all three do next year. And, and Karras, by the way, we didn't mention him, but first off, I didn't really think he had a bad year. I thought he was pretty good for the most of the year.
And honestly, Isaac had a really good year too. Yeah. Like if he would have got injured right before the playoffs, I think the perception of him would have been totally different. But
just some stinky playoffs, and those are sometimes hard to wash off offensively for role guys. With that said, I did want to just mention Karras is reuniting with a coach where he had the most success he ever had. So that is one reason why it might be Karras and not George, as we both picked.
I'll push back just a little bit. I think Karras' last couple of years have been his best all-around years, but I know what you're saying.
I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I don't need to argue this one.
Yeah, no, we're going we're going all in. The next 40 minutes are dedicated to our guy Caris LeVert. Our buddy, speaking of our guys, Pastor A-Rod from the Discord asks, if you could pick one role player from Cavs history and put them on the current team, who would you pick? Carter, I'm going to put some rules and regulations on this one. Nobody that has made an all-star team.
Nobody that has made an all-star team. I'm going to make you go first because that's a new rule and regulation.
Okay. So it's tough because there's so many good players to pick from. Like when I think of perfect role players, I think of, my guy Delonte West. I think of prime Tristan, which, if I could put prime Tristan on this team, that would be a luxury to have him with JA. But I'm actually going to go with speaking of friends of the podcast, I'm going to go with an old buddy in Larry Nance Jr. just because we need some depth at the four. There's no real stretch fours that I could pick from that, weren't an all-star, right? I can't pick Kevin Love. As much as I love Andy, that's a complicated fit. Larry doesn't have that consistent three-point range, but he does have kind of the ball skills to make that work and can play both the 4 and the 5, and he'd just be good for the vibe. So I'm going to go with Larry here.
There are not a lot of stretch 4s that fit the bill, but there is a stretch 5 that fits the bill, Justin. Give me Channing Frye. Give me Channing. No, not Spencer Hawes. I don't know if Channing Frye is the absolute, no doubt, best, former role player that could fit onto this roster, but he would solve the thing that I've been kind of obsessed with, which is what would a stretch 5 look like on this roster, especially in a backup position. I think this Cavs team would actually be in a better place to insulate Channing's defensive, ups and downs than those championship teams were.
Honestly, you're right.
I think he would be a guy who could play next to Jarrett or Evan, because Jarrett and Evan are so switchable and versatile guarding the perimeter. And he would just give our lineup an absolute bomber. That would just kind of make everything easy for everyone.
I so rarely agree with you, but I think you actually swayed me. I think Channing is the better pick here. I will change my answer to Channing, and
what a vibes guy, a legendary vibes guy,
all-time vibes guy. So Larry's going to have to settle for the honorable mention when it comes to this. The tricky thing is, you would just love to be able to pick, a small forward with size and 3D capabilities and all that. But we
never heard of her.
It's just, it's LeBron, and then like you just don't have any other options. Like you could go Larry Nance Sr., but he was an all-star at one point. So
going to be looking through the rosters from the 1970s.
Yeah, you're going a little bit too far back, and that
Ricky
just makes
Davis,
things complicated.
Call it in.
Mike from Twitter asks, it looks like the Cavs have moved on from Isaiah Mobley. Have you guys heard anything about where he will be playing? I think this is a great opportunity and just kind of a launching off point to just kind of remind people or those that are new to the podcast, we don't do reporting. Neither of us know how to do reporting. We have no ability to kind of source things, even though we have this partnership with the Cavs that we are incredibly appreciative of.
But with that said, I did talk to Isaiah's agent. No, I didn't.
We do not bother the team with that. They give us the space to just kind of sit here and give our takes. It's why we really appreciate the work that the beat reporters do that cover this team, that give us kind of the stories and the insights that we aren't able to get. So I don't have any information there. Like my best guess is he's probably looking for two-way opportunities around the league, and if those aren't there, hopefully he's back with the Charge, right? Like you don't have to be on that two-way contract to be playing with the team. We've seen that in the past with some of these guys, so I'd like to see him around, but it does seem like the two-way spots are likely spoken for at this point.
Yep. Shouts to Isaiah. Good Cavalier, good developmental crack. Yep. I liked the pick when it happened, and didn't quite flash the way we wanted to when he got minutes with the big club, but hey, that's what two ways are for.
Absolutely. The real true treasure on Twitter asks, what do you want to see from the remaining 2-3 roster spots? I like Moses Brown for backup center. How would you guys feel about one of Nas Little or EJ Liddell for the backup 4 spot? Carter.
Oh man, it's tough because they really do need a backup 5. And if assuming Isaac comes back, I think you still need to sign an actual backup 5 with some heft, just to eat some minutes, eat innings for you in the regular season. Like, I don't think you're going to have we lost Evan or Jarrett for the year and we're going to be okay because we signed this guy. Like I think, you don't practice screwed over, and you're probably screwed if either of those guys go down for the year. Right. But like, I think you need someone to eat some minutes. I think Moses Brown is a perfectly fine idea, and really just any veteran backup 5, you could either go with Moses Brown, who's a little more spry, but has also logged plenty of years in the league now where there's probably no unearthed talent there that has been unseen until now, or run it back with Tristan or a player like Tristan. I really like JaVale McGee still. And then you just run into the...
I would be okay with JaVale.
Yeah, I actually like JaVale a lot. Even though, he's getting near the end of his career as well. The problem, to get to the second half of the question, which is Nas Little or EJ Liddell, super fun flyers. Liddell I would like more on a two-way than on a big boy contract. But Nas Little I think is a particularly valuable player, who definitely I think is worth a shot at the minimum. But then you kind of look into the roster intricacies of what the Cavs are dealing with, how close they are to the tax line. And it's like, if it's between signing a backup 5 that can actually eat those minutes like JaVale, or signing a higher upside player that I'd probably like more in Nas Little, I still have to feel like I got to lean towards roster construction at that point and pick the center. Because it's also worth noting, sorry for the little ramble here, Justin, but we have...
If I got on your case for rambles, like you would have unlimited ammo against me.
We would devolve into chaos. But the other thing to consider here, Justin, is that they don't have any projected 5s in their two-way slot. Because in years past, you could say, we have Isaiah Mobley, we have Pete Nance. They could eat up some minutes here. They don't even have that. So I think they have to sign a center. Do you agree with that?
I do. Yeah, I think you absolutely have to sign a center. At this point, it's Dean. Like I think Dean's kind of the backup emergency big,
and that's never felt good to me.
No, it's statistically it's worked, but I still don't love that as a consistent look. I still, if I could, would love a 4-5 more than a true 5. I just don't think a lot of those guys are out there. You know, going back to the previous question, if we could put Larry on this roster, or someone that, you know, an Isaiah Stewart, you know, these kind of stretch 4-5s, I would love a player like that. But, you know, realistically, they're not on the market right now. So I think you do kind of have to settle for a true center. And when it comes to Nas Little, like, that's someone that I remember last offseason I was really interested in bringing into the mix. I will say about EJ Liddell, like, he's still working his way back from a very serious injury, and there's only so many developmental minutes left, right? Like, Darius is still going to need some. Mobley's getting a bunch. Isaac, if he's back, is going to be getting some. And like, Nas Little,
let's sign Harry Giles.
And like, Nas Little is shorter and smaller than Jaylon Tyson. Like, we were talking about, is Jaylon Tyson going to get minutes? There is no scenario where I want to give Nas Little minutes over Jaylon Tyson. Right?
Good point.
The playmaking ability that he has, just the rounded out skill sets, with the track record of a jumper is all stronger than Nas Little at this point. So if I'm giving developmental minutes to a player within that archetype, I'm going to the first round pick that we don't believe is going to be part of the opening night rotation unless he really makes a strong impression. So
that's a great point, dude. I hadn't really thought about that with Nas. And sometimes as a front office, you almost have to save your coaching staff from themselves, because even if Naz is better than Jaylon Tyson right now,
like, he might just be a more sound defender, and he's not going to make mistakes. And sometimes, you know, coaches will go towards that. No, we need those developmental reps. We need to give those guys the opportunity, because, you know, it is going to be a battle for those minutes. You are going to be getting contributions for a lot of guys, and it's going to be a lot of tough decisions. And you know, it's always nice to get that kind of help. It's nice to get that kind of support. Zoom provides that. And, you know, Zoom has another way of providing that great support these days, because only you can do your best work, Carter. Zoom AI Companion can help you do the rest, like automatically taking notes, answering meeting questions, and helping you respond to your coworker. Available at no cost with eligible paid plans. Work happy with Zoom AI Companion.
I'll say it. I thought you were lost on that segue on the way in.
Really?
Yeah.
I typically, I'm defaulting to the support.
The support, it's brutal. I was actually watching you try to piece your way to it, because it's like our muscle memory, you know, we're so tied to the word support, and I think we got to find our new, like, trigger word.
Yeah, working in that only you can do your best work. That's going to take some time. That's going to take some effort. That's going to take some long hours in the gym.
You know how, you know, when actors, like, do a different accent for a movie and they have, like, a dialect coach, they always have, like, their one phrase or their one word that, like, grounds them in the accent. That's what we need for our ad reads in order for us to thrive.
I like it. I'm going to start working on that in my downtime, and hopefully that can become more seamless in the future. Our buddy Waji asks, are you concerned about the lack of big man depth?
Yes.
You know, we got into that a little bit, but yes. You know, when Dean Wade is kind of the, you know, currently the backup big, the backup 5, I don't think that's an ideal spot. And again, this ties into the roster's not finished. We're probably going to see a move before training camp. I'd say almost certainly going to see a move before training camp. But yes, at this time, I would like to see another body added to the mix.
Yeah, I'll be worried till I see someone. I'm not, like, panicking, because I assume they're going to sign someone. But until I see that report hit my timeline, then I will feel nervous. But a lot of folks I'd be still happy to see on the market still.
And still a month before camp begins, so
crazy.
You know, it's going to take a little bit of time. From Twitter, Jose Appreciator says, would you like to see more Dean Wade at the 3 this year, or potentially starting to get more size on the court? Me in particular, no. I really love Dean Wade as a 4. I know he's had some success kind of spot starting at the small forward position. I do think, and this is, you know, a rant I've had before, but I think so often when people talk about adding size at the wing, it always seems to come from the lens of, let's get more size, let's, you know, fix the defense. And we just haven't had those defensive issues. So especially when you're talking about a Kenny Atkinson offense, at least looking historically what it is, having guys that can initiate, guys that can create at, you know, the 1 through 3 has always been really, really important to those offenses. And I like Dean more as that 4, especially, you know, if the lack of big man depth is, you know, still kind of an issue. I prefer going with guys like Max Strus, Karis LeVert, Isaac Okoro, Jaylon Tyson, having Ty Jerome or Sam Merrill in the mix, and that's shoving guys over to the 3. I'd rather go that route, especially if the defense continues to hold. Like if there is defensive issues in the future and, having 6'6" guys or 6'5" guys at the small forward position becomes an issue, then maybe we can readdress it. But right now, I think fixing the offense is more of the focus. And, the defensive concerns, until it actually is an issue, like if it wasn't an issue against the Boston Celtics when you're down Jared Allen, I just don't think it's going to be an issue.
You know that meme of the guy sweating, standing over 2 buttons that have like 2 different options?
Yes.
That's me right now with one button that says more positional size and another button that says better fits for what the team actually needs. Because I really love the idea. Every time someone says Dean Wade at the 3, I'm just kind of licking my chops. I'm geeked. Because typically what that means is that Dean is shooting well enough to play at the 3, which means he's kind of going through one of his hot stretches there. And I also selfishly love the way it allows Evan to play defense. I feel like when the team is smaller positionally, even when Evan is playing with Jarrett, there's a lot more focus on cleanup rather than being a devastating remover of options,
Right.
And so something I really like about Dean at the 3 is it allows you to be a little switchier, allows Evan to play a little more free safety, knowing you would just have a little bit more positional size. So I like all these things, but I still think you're right. I think those are things I like in things, but I think for the overall needs of the roster and for the roster to hit its like highest ceiling, it probably involves more Dean at the 4. I certainly don't want to bench Max. So, I mean, I didn't even really want to engage with that in terms of starting. But, as a curveball, I really like it. And it's not that I certainly would still like to see it, especially in certain matchups.
And to what you said earlier about, Max being that kind of on-off god for the Cavs, right? Like, if the lineup data continues to say, like, this is working and this is when they outscore opponents by, their largest margins, like, stick with that. But I do think, that's going to be one of my big questions going into next year is how much of that does translate, right? Like, just because, there is a coaching change and we're assuming positive changes, you never know what, there's give and take. There's only so much energy you can expend within a basketball game. And sometimes, the energy you're contributing to the offensive end can take away from your defense, or, playing at a different pace is going to mean you're no longer in the half court as frequently defensively, and maybe there's some issues there. So, those stylistic changes and the impact they have, it still kind of remains to be seen, which, Z asks on Twitter, outside of results and statistics, what stylistic differences do you expect Cavs fans will notice the most under Kenny Atkinson? And do you think there will be noticeable differences on offense and defense?
It's a great question, and the framing takes away so many cheap, easy answers. Outside of results and stats, what differences do we expect to see? And I think
he knows I'm a dork and I'm going to be talking lineup data all the time. So.
Yeah, I'm joking because my first instinct was to dive into those 2 kind of fields. So it actually kind of challenged me to think like, what do I actually want to see? And I think at its core, I want to see high post action for the bigs, whenever we see a main action happening, I want to see some decoy action or off ball action on the weak side that are leveraging Darius and Donovan, whoever is off ball at the time, so they can get the ball with advantage at a higher percentage. I felt like the back half of the year, there was a lot of just every possession had to be initiated by either one of those 2 dudes from 0. And just catching, curling off a pin down as opposed to, walking the ball up to run a pick and roll. I just think it gives them that 5% advantage that really helps them overcome some of the limitations they have, especially from a size perspective. So that, I think, is the crux of really what I want to see. Defensively, I frankly hope they run it back. I love the way this team plays defense, especially when they're all locked in and working hard. but offensively, I guess that would be my answer.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the Cavs offensively, I do expect them to play with more tempo. I think all kind of your expectations from a structural standpoint are sound, and I expect to see that. But what I hope to see, and I don't know if we're going to see this, is that, they do play with more tempo and there seems to be more of a flow to the offense, right? Where, okay, option B didn't go our way. We didn't generate the advantage we wanted to see. We know what option C and option B and option C are, right? Like we're able to go through each of the sets, each of the motions, and there isn't as much kind of confusion and standing around, right? And I think that was just too evident, especially late in games. And I still think some of that's self-inflicted when it comes to Donovan and Darius, but I really do think them getting out and running it, Mobley, handling the ball in transition, just more movement and more purpose with how they run their sets. I don't even think there's going to be a massive difference in terms of the type of sets they run. Like, I do think that we're still going to see a lot of split cut actions with these guys, because that there was that influence coming from Golden State already with Luke Walton, right? Like, and we saw a lot of that being run, but we didn't see them stick with it consistently. And I just think there wasn't that kind of second nature understanding of, okay, what is our second and third look in all of these sets. So I expect to see that kind of change. And I think you would feel that, right? Like we saw too frequently that the Cavs were a team that got out in transition, that generated those opportunities in the past, but it still felt like they were playing slow, and they were still playing slow overall just because of how slow they played in the half court. I don't think that's going to be the case. And I think everything you said about, the guards getting easier looks and off-ball opportunities and not having to start from zero, that I really am excited to see and hopeful that I will see.
Yeah, and to the pace point, I'll tell you what, if they don't play faster in the half court, we will have once and for all confirmation that these dudes just ain't want to do it. Because it's going to be a second coach that's saying this stuff to them and getting in their ear about it, and and sometimes one thing I would caution listeners not to do is to go, see, JB wanted to play slow the whole time. 'Cause sometimes the same coach can be saying the same thing, and then a different coach comes in and says the same thing, and then they listen to the second guy. It's just. It might just be, more faith in the system, or more maturity and development,
seeing it didn't work twice in the playoffs, right? 2 years in a row that, hey, like, we keep running into this brick wall. Why are we walking towards the wall, right? Like, we can run past it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. I'm excited to see those stylistic changes. Good question.
Yeah. Another question from Reese in the Discord. If you could pick one, which would you pick for the regular season? Weak start and strong finish, strong start and weak finish, or relatively steady?
Probably a weak start, strong finish, because that's easy to explain away from from a getting a new coach acclimated standpoint. Though, I might go the other way, because I do think this team needs some really strong statement of play. The one thing I'm actually not crazy interested in is relatively steady, which is funny, because you would think that would be the easiest answer, because there's no downside to it. But something that I think is most important for this Cavs franchise right now is to give glimpses into ways their ceiling can be raised. Right now, I think they are relatively steady as a franchise, especially in comparison to the turmoil going on around the league. All their top five guys are locked up to long-term deals. They're running back 13 guys from their roster from last year, most likely at this point. So it's like steady. I got steady. I want to see your, like,
I have not got steady. I don't know where you got steady.
I'm talking feeling over a 3-year sample size. Okay. We have steady.
Okay.
That is what I'm saying. And what's most important to me is that I see this team's knockout punch be as good as the best teams in the league. I did not see that last year. I only saw it during a stretch where we were missing 2 of our 4 best players and playing some of the worst teams in the league. I want to see a stretch like that, kind of like that stretch from 2 years ago when we went to Denver and beat them, and like had all these like statement wins. The win against the Clippers in LA. Like, I want to see stretches like that. Those are going to be more important to me than, they had 3 bad weeks at the front end or back end of the year.
So you're going to accuse me of cheating here, because I would argue that the Boston Celtics last season were very steady. They started very good and they were really good throughout.
Well, that is cheating. And I'm not interested in the rest of your answer.
And you can improve while being steady. You can get, it's just not exponential improvements throughout that. So I lean that way, because,
Boo this man, this coward.
I don't want weak start and strong finish. I would worry that a weak start and strong finish could lead to, big kind of shake up at the deadline or something like that, right? Like I do think you're right that you need to make a statement at the start of the year. And I guess we have seen, if you don't finish particularly strong, that doesn't always translate to the playoffs. We see that time and time again. How you finish a regular season really doesn't have a lot of indicators. It's why, March record tends to be the least meaningful when you kind of look historically month by month. So maybe I would say strong start and weak finish, but I guess my follow-up question before I committed to one would be how strong and how weak, right? Like how low is the low? Because if it's, if you are playing at a meteoric pace and you just kind of go just above 500 to close out the season and you wind up with 55, 56 wins, I'll take that. That would be my choice. I would like that, show up. If you're showing up and you're playing well against the best teams in the league and you're still winning some of those statement games, but you have some letdowns, you lose to Chicago and it's annoying, or a Toronto loss that drives me nuts. Like that kind of stuff I can live with. But I do want to see the highs at some point this season, because I just don't think that we saw that. And if you're putting a gun to my head, I'll probably lean strong start and weak finish, as long as you're not talking about like just a total tailspin, because that goes beyond weak.
Yep, I think that's fair. And it's a tough question, even though you tried to completely dodge it, which is reprehensible.
It's also par for the course.
Absolutely,
that is my default. I will sit on some fences and I will find my way to weasel out of a tough question. Depressed Izu asks, what are your expectations next season for Darius Garland?
You go first. This is your boy.
I expect him at the very least to give, actually, I don't expect him to go back to 22-23. I expect him to take the leap that he should have taken last season. That probably would have happened if it wasn't due to injuries. I will die on this hill. I think last season was the result of injuries. I think he had steadily been getting better and better, and we just flat out didn't get to see any games last year with him fully healthy. I understand that, I do have concerns that, the track record for injuries is getting a little tougher. I have those concerns for both guards, right? Like Donovan's missed more games than Darius the last 4 or 5 years here. Like that's kind of concerning when we're concerned about Darius as well. But I do expect him to take the step forward that we were going to see last season. I firmly believe we were going to see last season. And, when you talk about the optimized version of this team and the, if they can find a path to contention, or at least, competing amongst the contenders, I think the way that looks is Evan Mobley being the most impactful player on the team, Donovan being the leading scorer and the leading play finisher, and that guy that steps up in the big moments and closes games out. And I think it's Darius, an assertive Darius that is aggressively initiating the offense. I think as Evan Mobley gets better, the more assertive Garland's going to need to be, because he might get fewer kind of touches or scoring opportunities. He's not going to be able to pass them up like he has in the past. When someone goes under, he's going to need to take those shots. And I just think he's the most talented playmaker on the team. And whether that means, second or third leading scorer, I don't really care, because I think the best version of this team has Darius and Mobley pretty close when it comes to that. But I do think that he needs to be the primary initiator of the offense, and doing so in an assertive manner.
Yeah, I mean, my expectation for Darius Garland is that he's the point guard for this team. I think you did really great work during the last postseason, kind of tracking his touches per game and the way that he really became a really aggressively off-ball player. At times just completely cut out of the offense altogether. There were points where Max Strus had more touches per game than him. And, I think that if that is the future, then, I just don't know what they're doing with the core. I think they really have to sink or swim, letting Darius be Darius and do things that make Darius special.
Right.
Now, of course, like some of these things are natural adaptations. Darius was hurt all year. His back was, we saw him at those playoffs games sitting on the wedge. With
the brace on.
Yeah, with a bad back. So like sometimes you have to, just because like playoffs, you can't worry about anything but winning, and sometimes that means you got to say, DJ, you're not quite right. We just need you to be a decoy on these plays for a while, and we've got to let Donnie run the point. But I think when the team's fully healthy, if Darius isn't running the point, isn't really leading and orchestrating, then I think we've kind of lost the plot, and like that would be a big negative indicator for me. So that would be my expectation, is Darius is the true blue, no doubt, point guard for this team.
And I still think there's a lot of indicators too, right? Like you talk about, he did not have a good playoffs last year. He flat out was not as effective as he needed to be. I thought he was fine against the Knicks. I didn't think he was, good enough to carry the team. And Mobley had a very tough series. Donovan had a really tough series by his standards. I thought Darius was just kind of fine. But I do think that it's encouraging when you look at the playoffs. Like, we have concerns over Okoro's ability to translate his game because he just kind of takes himself out of those settings. The fact that, you're down 0-1 against the Knicks and Darius comes out with a massive game, super assertive, wins that game, is, our best player in that one game that we won in that series. That to me shows, he's someone that's not afraid of the moment and is capable of contributing in that way. Game 5 against Orlando, it's 2-2, highly pressure, probably the highest pressure game that they had played into that point. He comes out and he's awesome in the first 3 quarters of that game. Game 7, awful game, but he closes the game out in the fourth quarter. Donovan trusts him with that shot. I think he scored or created like 70%, 80% of the points in this fourth quarter of that game.
I got to rewatch Game 7. That's got to be on my summer list.
It's not as fun on rewatch. But I will say there are some good parts of it. But I just think like those are positive indicators, right? And even Game 4 against Boston, like I thought he played a really, really good game, and him and Mobley almost won that game against the defending champs. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think, okay, there's something there. We can build upon that. If he doesn't, I think that we would get to the point where that's a little bit concerning this year. And if it looks like it did last season, you have to kind of have some tough conversations. But I really do think that it was primarily injuries. You look at him in the runs, he looks, spry, he looks confident, he looks strong like he was before. And it's just so night and day physically different than what we saw. I just really, really think that we are in for the leap that should have occurred last season. And the fact that we were as good as we were, despite the season from hell, I think is encouraging. And actually it makes me want to ask you a question that's not here on the rundown. Were we too low in our expectations for the Cavs heading into the last 2 preseasons? Because both years we talked about, avoid the plan. 2 years ago it was avoid the plan, make a first round series. Last year, it was win a series and show that you could compete in the second round. The Cavs achieved our goals. Like, as Homer optimists like we are, they achieved what we set out in the preseason, the kind of bar that was set by the podcast. And it still felt like, hey, there was something there. Were we just being too low on the team? Were we handling them with kid gloves? Like, I really do think that, just that sense that there was something more with this current roster, and they still accomplished the goals that we set out, makes me wonder, were we just too low on them the last 2 years?
So I actually was thinking about this very topic, in a roundabout way, earlier this afternoon as I was thinking about this podcast, which is that, so my answer here is that I think that for the last 2 years, the team's expectations and goals have actually been almost perfectly aligned. Mm-hmm. What we should expect of the team and what the team should want have been almost exactly aligned going into the year. So when you achieve your goal, when they're perfectly aligned, I think that there's a little bit less of a high and a little bit of like, oh, well, why weren't we one step, wouldn't it be great to be one step further along? Whereas I think this year is the first year where their goals should actually be different from their expectations. I think that this is a team that their goal 100% should be to make the conference finals. I think that is really what they should come out as a team and go, hey, we made it to the second round last year. Let's get to the Final Four this year. Whereas I think where their expectations lie is probably around the same result. I think most folks have them as the fourth or fifth best team in the East.
Yeah.
And, when you're the fourth or fifth best team in the East, it's great to make the second round. So I think it's really the first year where there's that misalignment, and it'll actually be, in a weird way, a little bit easier for me at least to root for them because, I think it's a disaster if you don't meet your expectations. But if you don't meet your goal, we're at the point now where the goal is just so much harder. It's way harder to make the conference finals than it is to duck the play-in tournament. So it's it's one of those things where for me, it won't be catastrophic if they don't hit their goal. Where it would be a pleasant surprise to me if they hit their goal. I think that's where some of those feelings come the last couple of years and why it'll at least be a little different for me this year.
It's interesting, too, because it aligns with the goals that they've set out on media day, too, right? Like people have said, they made the Donovan trade to be a contender right away. That wasn't what was said. It was we want to, we want to avoid the play-in. We want to make the playoffs and give these guys experience. Last year it was we want to win a round of the playoffs, right? Like I think, whether those arguments are in bad faith or not, like it just doesn't align with what the team has been saying. And I do think, maybe us setting the goals where we have the last couple of years was just kind of an acknowledgement, and maybe with the team as well, that, you are going to go through growing pains with a young team. And even though we've seen the highs and we know what this team can accomplish, we know what this core can do when they're all playing at their best. Despite knowing that, we know that there are going to be some bumps along the road, and that might be why we've seen, this level of run it back, which, really is uncommon. But it aligns with like my favorite parts of team building, right? Like the internal development and kind of falling in love with a team and seeing can they find, like, can they learn from their experiences rather than just kind of swapping guys in and out of the lineup. Like, this is the type of team building that I really love. I will disagree with you just a little bit here, Carter. I think, their expectation should be to make a conference finals. Like, I agree. Like, that's where the bar should be set. I think their goal should be winning a championship. Like, I really do think that this is the first year where even if it's a 5% chance and you need some breaks to go your way, if this season ended with a championship, I would be a little shocked, but I wouldn't be sitting here, or not, I shouldn't say a little shocked. I would be shocked, but I wouldn't be sitting here saying there was no scenario where I thought that this was possible. I do think that there is a small chance that it could be possible this season. Obviously, that should not be the expectation. There's a lot of teams that they have to prove that they are first on their level and then that they can beat them. But I do think that this is the first year where I truly believe that there is an outside chance of that.
Yeah, I think really at that point, it's more of a semantics argument, because I would say their stretch goal should be to win a championship, but their attainable goal should be to get to the conference finals. Like,
Fair.
But the fact that you think their expectation should be to make the conference finals, I will push back on, because the reality is I would not be advocating for, I think if they don't make the conference finals, I could see a billion outcomes where that happens, where I don't go, oh man, this build of the team is in big trouble, And that's what I think
it has
missing.
To be an existential crisis.
I think missing your goals.
The season would be a failure. Yeah, I do think like it would be a failure, but I don't think it's like a blow it up type failure. Just because right now they are going to be behind in a lot of people's eyes. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee. Right, like they need to prove that they're on that level. But I think internally the belief should be we are on their level. We can beat them. We can make a conference finals.
Yeah, I think now we're just getting back into the semantics, but I would certainly, and also there is a degree to which I just think I'm grading on a gentler curve. Maybe it's just where I think the team is relative to you, but like also like it kind of reflects my general contentment with where the team is, which like I think a lot of people like don't agree with, but I'm mostly like, yeah, I'm cool to be the Memphis Grizzlies for a couple years.
It was literally all we wanted.
I wanted, and
in the summer of 2018 after LeBron went, we just wanted that was exactly what we wanted.
And damn it if I'm not intellectually consistent, Justin.
2 questions from Corey before we wrap this thing up. I've seen a lot of Evan Mobley's progress in live summer reps from video evidence. From video evidence, it looks like he has a tighter handle, better self-creation, and improved three-point shot. Based on what these workout videos shows, what skill do you think will translate more this season? A tighter handle and better self-creation, or more catch and shoot 3-point shooting and 3-point volume?
I'll answer this one quickly and just say I hope it's the former. I hope it's the handle and the self-creation, because again, I do think that's the actual biggest problem with the team's offensive shape in the double big lineups is that they don't have enough ball handlers. So if Evan can go from an okay dribbler for a 4 to a good dribbler for a 4, that would change everything. Yeah,
and honestly, I think you made the best point when you compared him to Zion, where no one has these conversations about Zion, who's a worse shooter than Mobley from 3 and has made fewer threes than Mobley in his career, just because he's able to create. He's able to get to the rim. You don't need to have that stretch 5 next to Zion because of those self-creation abilities. I think it's absolutely needs to be the handle. If he's attacking the rim like that, like I love to see, the improved jumper. I think we've seen the improved jumper over the last couple of years. He shot better from mid-range. He shot, a career best from 3, 37%. I'd like to see that volume tip up, but ultimately, man, like I don't want to see him taking more than like 3 threes a game anyways, even if he does become a consistent shooter. The handle is going to have more function, and it's going to impact the team more on a game-to-game, possession basis. So I will definitely say handle. And I guess the second question from Corey kind of ties into this, which is there is a lot of talk about our best lineups being the 1 guard and 1 big because the lane is less clogged and we have more shooters out there. However, our starting 5 is our best players individually. Could the solution to maximizing our starters and solving the spacing issues be Mobley having the ball in his hands, at the elbows, top of the key, and even bringing the ball up? That way his defender is more pulled out to the lane. DJ, Donovan, and Max are able to draw defenders because they are threats on 3. And JA would be able to set ball screens for the guards or run 4-5 pick and rolls. Thoughts?
Sounds great, Corey.
I mean, that ties into the handle. That ties into the handle playmaking and self-creation, right? Like that is why we want it, because it unlocks those type of solutions to the roster.
The one thing I'll say about that is it all sounds great, but you still need guys to play north-south, whether that is Evan, whether that's running some big pick and roll with Jarrett, whether that is dribble handoff with real intent. But like, I think there's sometimes you get into this idea of like, oh, he'll stand at the elbow and then we'll just run sets. They'll just run different screens around the perimeter and we'll eventually get open. But like teams that really want to get over those screens typically can. And like sometimes you can get a little floaty just hanging around on the edge of the perimeter, just running like kind of feeble pin down attempts. You got to find ways to get north-south when you're playing that way. That's something that, for all the love the Warriors get, something they didn't do particularly well was generate a lot of fouls and get to the rim a ton. They kind of could get floaty at their worst. So you have to kind of avoid that instinct, though. I mean, to be clear, Corey, I totally agree with you, and that's exactly what I want to see this offense do more of.
We really hope so. I'm excited to see what it looks like. It'd be really nice if we got the leap that should have happened last season for Darius and the leap from Mobley. I mean, I know I caught some flack last year doing our season preview where I said I didn't expect Mobley to take a leap. I got my share from our listeners in the Discord for that one, especially with me normally being the optimist. But, you know, I'm a realistic optimist, at least in my eyes. And I am being 100% serious when I do think that this is the first season in a while that could realistically end in a title. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I do think this is the start of a run of this team seriously contending, and I think the expectations need to shift to that. So I'm excited to see what this season is going to bring. I'm excited to be talking Cavs, and a big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Click that notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.